First contact. The vast emptiness of deep space stretched before the Vespian exploration vessel Celestial Seeker. Captain Zix stood on the command deck, her iridescent wings folded neatly against her back as she gazed through the viewing portal. The ship's crystalline structure captured and refracted the distant starlight, casting prismatic patterns across the polished floor. "Captain, we're detecting an unusual signal," announced Navigator Trillian, her antennae twitching with excitement. "It appears to be artificial in nature, but doesn't match any known Galactic Union transmission patterns." Zix moved gracefully to the navigation console, her compound eyes registering the anomalous energy signature pulsing on the display. The Vespians had been exploring this sector for 3 standard cycles, cataloging stellar phenomena for the Galactic Union's ever-expanding database of cosmic knowledge. In 800 years of space exploration, the 17 species of the Union had charted nearly a third of the galaxy, establishing outposts of learning and cultural exchange throughout known space. "Origin?" she asked, mandibles clicking softly. "The signal is emanating from the shadow of the gas giant in System J9842, responded Science Officer Vestra, his translucent exoskeleton glowing with bioluminescent excitement. "Curiously, there was nothing there in our preliminary scans. Perhaps a cloaking technology," suggested Trillian. Captain Zix considered this. The Union employed stealth technology for scientific observation, but nothing that could completely mask a vessel from all detection methods. "Set course for the signal source," Zix decided. "Standard approach protocols. Let's see what we found." The Celestial Seeker adjusted its trajectory, its organic crystalline hybrid engines pulsing with soft blue light. As a vessel of peace and exploration, it carried minimal defensive capabilities. Shield generators and short-range deterrent beams were its only protections. After all, in the enlightened age of the Galactic Union, warfare had become obsolete, relegated to historical archives as species evolved beyond primitive aggression. As they approached the gas giant, the signal grew stronger. The massive swirling storms of the planet provided a dramatic backdrop as they rounded its curve, and the source of the signal finally came into view. "By the Hive Mother," whispered Vestra, his voice barely audible. Before them floated a vessel of such imposing design that it seemed to defy the very principles of peaceful exploration. Unlike the organic, flowing lines of Union ships, this craft was angular and intimidating. Dark metal plates covered its hull, interrupted only by what were unmistakably weapon emplacements. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, bristling along its flanks. At nearly 3 kilometers in length, it dwarfed the Celestial Seeker by a factor of 6. "Are those weapons?" asked Trillian, her voice quavering. Such an extensive array would be capable of planetary bombardment. Zix felt her secondary heart begin to beat rapidly. In 8 centuries of space exploration, the Union had encountered many civilizations with varying levels of technology, but never had they found one that built vessels so explicitly designed for warfare. "It's altering course," reported Tactical Officer Felix, his carapace flushing with stress hormones. "It's heading directly toward us." "Maintain position," ordered Zix, her training overriding her shock. "Open communications channels on all standard frequencies. Remember our first contact protocols." The massive vessel continued its approach, seeming to glide through space with unnatural grace despite its size. As it drew closer, details became clearer. Battle scars etched into its hull, massive engines glowing with restrained power, and what appeared to be launch bays large enough to hold vessels the size of the Celestial Seeker itself. "Captain, they're scanning us," reported Vestra, antennae quivering. "Their technology. It's penetrating our shields as if they weren't even there." Before Zix could respond, the communication array chimed. "We're receiving a transmission," said communications specialist Mira, her slender fingers working over the crystalline console. "Audio and visual. The universal translator is processing." "On screen," ordered Zix, straightening her posture and adjusting her ceremonial captain's sash. The view screen flickered, and for the first time, the crew of the Celestial Seeker gazed upon a human. The being stood tall, its body encased in a dark uniform adorned with symbols of unknown meaning. Its face was mostly hairless, with two forward-facing eyes that seemed to evaluate them with unsettling directness. "This is Captain Alexander Reed of the United Earth Defense Force vessel Poseidon." The being spoke, its voice deep and resonant. "You have entered a designated security zone. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." The universal translator rendered the message in standard Union language, but even through translation, the commanding tone was unmistakable. This was not a request. It was a demand, backed by the silent threat of the massive warship. Zix stepped forward, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to convey openness and diplomacy. A gesture likely lost on the alien captain, she realized. "I am Captain Zix of the Galactic Union vessel Celestial Seeker. We are an exploration ship on a mission of peaceful discovery. We detected an unusual signal from this region and came to investigate." She paused, then added, "We were unaware this system was claimed by any spacefaring civilization." The human's expression remained unchanged. "Your vessel is scanning military installations. This could be construed as an act of aggression." Vestra chittered in alarm. "Captain, we're only using standard exploratory scans." Zix raised a limb to silence her officer. "Captain Reed, I assure you, our intentions are purely scientific. The Galactic Union comprises 17 species who explore the cosmos together in peace. We would welcome the opportunity to establish diplomatic relations with your people." Something flickered across the human's face, a subtle change that Zix couldn't interpret. After a moment, Reed nodded. "We will escort you to Outpost Delta. From there, diplomatic channels can be established. Deviate from our course, and we will consider it hostile action." The transmission ended abruptly. "Captain," Trillion's voice quavered, "their vessel. Those are planet-killer weapons. Why would any species need such destructive capability?" Zix had no answer. In all her cycles of exploration, she had never encountered a species that dedicated so much of its technology to warfare. The Union's philosophy had always been that advanced civilizations naturally evolved beyond conflict, channeling their energies into art, science, and exploration. "Follow their escort coordinates," she ordered, "and prepare a diplomatic team. It seems we have much to learn about these humans." As the Celestial Seeker adjusted course to follow the behemoth warship, Zix couldn't shake the feeling that the Union's fundamental understanding of the cosmos had just been challenged. What kind of history had shaped a species to build such instruments of destruction? What enemies did they face that required such overwhelming force? The journey to Outpost Delta was tense. The human warship maintained a position that kept its main weapon batteries trained on the Celestial Seeker, a fact not lost on Felix, the tactical officer. When they finally arrived, the outpost itself proved to be another shock. A massive structure orbiting a small moon, bristling with the same weapon systems as the Poseidon. Surrounding it were dozens of smaller vessels, each clearly designed for combat rather than exploration or trade. A shuttle was dispatched from the Celestial Seeker carrying Zix, Vestra, and Mira, a small diplomatic team representing the Union's scientific and communicative expertise. As they approached the docking bay, the sheer scale of human military engineering became even more apparent. The bay could have housed 50 shuttles their size, and armed personnel were visible at every access point. They were met by a delegation led by Captain Reed, who now stood flanked by officers in various uniforms. Up close, humans were even more imposing, taller than Zix had estimated, with dense musculature visible even through their uniforms. "Welcome to Outpost Delta," Reed said, his voice echoing in the cavernous docking bay. "I apologize for the security protocols, but we've had difficult first contact experiences in the past." Zix performed the Union's universal greeting, a complex gesture involving all 6 of her limbs. "We understand caution, Captain. The unknown can be frightening." Reed's expression remained neutral. "The unknown isn't what frightens us, Captain Zix. It's what we know is out there." He gestured toward a corridor. "This way to the diplomatic suite. Admiral Hastings is waiting to speak with you." As they walked through the outpost, Zix observed the humans around them. They moved with purpose, their bodies always positioned for action. Even those engaged in seemingly mundane tasks maintained an awareness of their surroundings that spoke of ingrained vigilance. "Your species seems very prepared for conflict," Vestra observed, his scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic caution. One of Reed's officers, a shorter female with dark skin and closely cropped hair, responded, "We don't have a choice. Humanity learned early that the galaxy doesn't reward the unprepared." Before Zix could inquire further, they arrived at a large chamber dominated by a circular table. At its head stood an older human, his face lined with what Zix would later learn were the marks of age and experience. "I am Admiral Sophia Hastings, Earth Defense Force," she introduced herself. "Please be seated. We have much to discuss." What followed was a crash course in human history, a tale so filled with conflict and struggle that Zix found it difficult to comprehend. Humans had fought among themselves for resources, territory, and ideologies for most of their recorded history. When they finally achieved unity, it was not through philosophical enlightenment, but through the threat of mutual destruction and the subsequent realization that their survival depended on cooperation. Their venture into space had been driven not by curiosity alone, but by the pragmatic need to secure resources beyond their home world. And when they encountered their first alien species, the now extinct Proxima horde, it was not a peaceful exchange of knowledge, but a bloody first contact that nearly ended with human extinction. The Proxima didn't respond to diplomatic overtures, Admiral Hastings explained, her voice heavy with the weight of memory. "They saw our colonies as easy targets. 3 worlds burned before we managed to develop weapons that could penetrate their shields." Zix felt her mandibles trembling. "This explains your predisposition toward military preparedness." Hastings's laugh was without humor. "Predisposition? Captain, the Poseidon you encountered is just one of our border patrol vessels. The full might of the Earth Defense Fleet exists because we've learned that in this galaxy, peace is maintained through strength." As the diplomatic meeting continued, cultural differences became increasingly apparent. The Union's philosophy of non-interference and gradual technological exchange clashed with humanity's direct, security-focused approach. Humans valued honesty to the point of bluntness, a trait that Mira, with her species' nuanced communication patterns, found particularly challenging. By the time the first alarm sounded, the diplomatic tensions had barely begun to ease. The shrill wail cut through their discussions like a blade. "Proximity alert," announced a human officer, rushing into the chamber. Multiple signatures detected at the edge of the system. Configuration matches Harvester's warships. Admiral Hastings's demeanor changed instantly, all diplomatic pretense vanishing. "How many?" 17 vessels, Mom. They'll reach the outpost in 30 minutes. Hastings turned to the Vespian delegation, her eyes hard. "It seems you're about to witness why we maintain our military readiness, Captain Zix. The Harvesters don't negotiate, they don't accept surrender, and they don't lead survivors." Zix felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. "Who are these Harvesters?" "The reason the Poseidon exists," Hastings replied grimly. "And they've just found us both. Alliance forged in fire." The command center of Outpost Delta thrummed with disciplined urgency as Admiral Hastings issued rapid-fire orders. Captain Zix watched with growing apprehension as tactical displays showed 17 massive vessels approaching, each one dwarfing even the impressive Poseidon. "The Harvesters are a nomadic predatory species," Captain Reed explained as he guided the Vespian delegation to a secure observation platform. "They move through space-consuming resources, asteroids, uninhabited planets, and inhabited worlds alike. They see other sentient life as merely another resource to be harvested. "Why haven't we encountered them in Union space?" asked Vestra, his scientific mind already analyzing this new threat. "You're lucky," Reed replied grimly. "They've been working their way through this arm of the galaxy for the past 80 years. We've been fighting a holding action, keeping them contained to this sector." The observation platform provided a panoramic view of space around the outpost. Zix could see the Poseidon moving into position, joined by 3 smaller human vessels. In the distance, her own ship, the Celestial Seeker, hung vulnerable and exposed. "Our ship has minimal defensive capabilities," Zix said urgently. "My crew, already being evacuated to the outpost," Reed assured her. "Standard procedure when civilians are caught in a combat zone." Zix bristled slightly at being classified as a civilian, but recognized the pragmatism in the human's actions. The Celestial Seeker was not designed for battle, and her crew would be safer on the outpost, regardless of how well armed it appeared to be. The comm system crackled. "This is Admiral Hastings to all personnel. Battle stations. Harvester fleet approaching. This is not a drill." On the view screens, the first of the harvester vessels came into visual range. Unlike the angular military precision of human ships or the organic elegance of Vespian craft, these vessels were grotesque amalgamations of technology, asymmetrical, with portions that appeared to be grafted on from other ships. Their surfaces were covered with irregular protrusions that pulsed with sickly yellow light. "They incorporate the technology of species they consume," Reed explained, noticing Vestra's fascinated horror. "That's what makes them so dangerous. They adapt and evolve with each encounter." "Admiral," came a voice over the comm. "First wave approaching weapons range. All ships engage at will," Hastings responded. "Defensive grid to full power. Launch all fighters." What followed was unlike anything the Vespians had witnessed in 8 centuries of space exploration. The Poseidon surged forward, its massive engines flaring blue-white as it accelerated toward the harvester fleet. From launch bays along its flanks, smaller craft poured forth. Dozens, then hundreds of fighter-sized vessels, forming up into precise formations. "Those are our Thunderbolt squadrons," Reed said with unmistakable pride. "Best pilots in the fleet." The fighter squadrons streaked toward the enemy, seeming impossibly small against the monstrous harvester ships. Zix expected them to be swatted away like insects, but instead they executed maneuvers of such precision and coordination that they slipped through the enemy's defensive fire, delivering pinpoint strikes against what appeared to be vulnerable junctions in the harvester vessel's hodgepodge construction. Meanwhile, the Poseidon itself engaged the lead harvester ship. For the first time, Zix saw the human warship's weapons unleashed. Massive railguns along its spine accelerated projectiles to relativistic speeds, creating visible distortions in space as they tore through the harvester's outer hull. Energy weapons that Zix couldn't even classify lashed out, carving precise patterns of destruction across the enemy vessel. "They're targeting specific systems," Vestra observed, his scientific detachment momentarily overcoming his horror at the violence. "Not random destruction. Surgical strikes." Reed nodded. "The harvester's ships are largely autonomous. Take out their central processor nodes, and the rest becomes disorganized. It's taken us decades to learn their weaknesses." A massive explosion bloomed silently in space as one of the harvester vessels shuddered, then broke apart. Cheers erupted from the human personnel, quickly silenced as they returned to their duties. "First blood to us," Reed murmured, "but there are still 16 more." The battle intensified as the harvester fleet adapted to the human tactics. Their weapons began targeting the fighter squadrons more effectively, and energy beams of coruscating yellow light lashed out at the Poseidon, splashing against its shields in cascades of dispersing energy. "Shield failure on Deck 12, called out a tactical officer. Rerouting power." The Poseidon rolled, presenting an undamaged section of shields to the enemy fire while continuing its devastating assault. 3 more harvester vessels were visibly damaged now. trailing debris and venting atmosphere into space. But the tide began to turn as the full Harvester fleet engaged. Two of the smaller human vessels shuddered under concentrated fire, their shields failing. One managed to retreat behind the Poseidon's protective cover, but the other erupted in a catastrophic explosion that left nothing but scattered debris. "The Intrepid is gone," someone reported, voice tight with emotion, but professionally controlled. No survivors detected. Zix felt a wave of sorrow. Despite their militaristic nature, these humans were fighting and dying to protect not only themselves, but also the Vespian crew who had stumbled into this conflict zone. "We need to assist them," she said firmly to Reed. "The Celestial Seeker has scientific equipment that could be repurposed, sensors that could identify weaknesses in the Harvester ships." Reed looked at her with surprise and what might have been respect. "Your ship's being evacuated, but if your science officer can access your sensor data from here." Vestra stepped forward immediately. "I can interface with our systems remotely. Give me access to your computer terminals." As Vestra worked frantically with the human technicians to integrate the Vespian sensors with the outpost's systems, the battle outside grew increasingly desperate. The Poseidon had destroyed 4 Harvester vessels, but suffered significant damage in return. Its movements were becoming sluggish, and sections of its hull were now exposed to space, emergency force fields barely containing the atmosphere within. "We've got something," Vestra announced finally. "The Harvester ships. They're linked by some kind of quantum entanglement network. That's how they coordinate so effectively without detectable communications." The human technicians immediately grasped the implications. "If we can disrupt that network, all their tactical advantages disappear," Reed finished. He hid his comm badge. "Admiral, the Vespians have identified a weakness. The Harvesters use quantum entanglement for ship-to-ship coordination." There was a moment of silence before Hastings responded. "Acknowledged. Poseidon will deploy the Thanatos protocol." Reed's expression changed subtly, a mix of grim determination and what Zix thought might be regret. "Everyone, secure yourselves. This might get intense." On the main view screen, the battle-scarred Poseidon disengaged from its current target and began a direct approach toward the center of the Harvester formation. Its remaining weapons fired continuously, not at the enemy vessels but into the space between them, creating a corridor of cleared debris and dispersed energy. "What are they doing?" Mira asked, her translator barely keeping up with her agitated clicks and trills. "Something we've only done twice before," Reed answered quietly. "The Thanatos protocol is our last resort weapon. It creates a temporary artificial singularity." Vestra's antennae shot up in alarm. A black hole. In the middle of a battle, the gravitational stresses alone cold. "It's controlled," Reed interrupted. "Short-lived and focused. But it's powerful enough to disrupt quantum entanglement across a wide area." The Poseidon had now reached the center of the Harvester formation. Several enemy vessels converged on it, sensing the danger. The human warship's engines flared one last time, pushing it into the perfect position, even as its hull began to buckle under concentrated enemy fire. "Thanatos protocol initiated," came Admiral Hastings's voice, unnaturally calm. "All personnel, brace for gravitational distortion." A moment of stillness descended, as if the universe itself held its breath. Then, from the heart of the Poseidon, a sphere of absolute darkness emerged, not merely dark in color, but an absence of light itself, a hole in reality. It expanded rapidly, engulfing the nearest Harvester vessels before they could retreat. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. As the artificial singularity reached its maximum size, approximately 5 kilometers in diameter, the Harvester vessels caught within simply ceased to exist, crushed beyond recognition by the overwhelming gravitational forces. Those outside its direct influence tumbled chaotically, their coordinated movements dissolving into random, panicked attempts to escape. "Their network is collapsing," Vestra confirmed, reading data from the integrated sensors. "Individual vessels are losing cohesion with the swarm intelligence. The humans wasted no time exploiting this advantage. The remaining defense vessels and fighter squadrons concentrated their fire on the disorganized harvesters, methodically destroying them one by one. Without their coordination, the once formidable enemy became vulnerable, their adaptive advantages nullified. In the center of the battlefield, the artificial singularity began to collapse upon itself, the Poseidon nowhere to be seen. "The Poseidon," Zix said softly. "Your people sacrificed themselves." Reed shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Watch." As the singularity collapsed to a pinpoint and winked out of existence, something emerged from the spatial distortion. The Poseidon, battered and scarred almost beyond recognition, but intact. Its engines were dark, and it drifted lifelessly, but it had somehow survived the gravitational maelstrom. How? Vestra asked, scientific curiosity overcoming his shock. "The Thanatos protocol creates the singularity just beyond our hull," Reed explained. "The Poseidon is designed with specialized gravitational shielding that allows it to survive the edge effects. It's not pleasant for the crew. Casualties are always high. But the ship and some of our people survive." The remaining human vessels moved to the Poseidon's aid, attaching tractor beams to stabilize its drift, while rescue shuttles approached its damaged hull. Meanwhile, the last of the harvester vessels were being systematically destroyed, no longer the coordinated threat they had been just minutes before. "Admiral Hastings is hailing us," announced a communications officer. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, bloodied but triumphant. "Captain Reed, the harvester threat has been neutralized. Begin recovery operations and prepare to receive casualties from the Poseidon." "Yes, Admiral. What about the Vespian delegation?" Hastings's gaze shifted to Zix and her companions. For a moment, her military facade softened. "Captain Zix, I believe we have much to discuss about the future relationship between humanity and your Galactic Union. Your assistance today was unexpected but deeply appreciated." Zix stepped forward. "Admiral, I have witnessed today what my people have forgotten for 8 centuries, that sometimes peace must be defended with strength. The Galactic Union has much to learn from humanity." "And perhaps," Hastings replied with the first genuine smile Zix had seen from her, "humanity has things to learn from the Union as well. A partnership between our civilizations could benefit us both." As the cleanup from battle began and casualties were tended to, Zix found herself on an observation deck with Captain Reed, watching as repair vessels swarmed around the damaged but surviving Poseidon. "Your warship," she said quietly, "is the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. Yet today, it saved not only your people but mine as well." Reed nodded, his gaze fixed on the vessel he commanded. "That's the paradox of human history, Captain Zix. We build weapons hoping never to use them, prepare for war while praying for peace, and create instruments of destruction that ultimately serve as our greatest protection. The Union has been fortunate," Zix acknowledged. 800 years of relative peace has allowed us to focus on science and exploration. But perhaps we've been naive about the dangers that exist in the darkness between stars. And perhaps, Reed countered, humanity has been so focused on survival that we've neglected the wonders of discovery. He turned to her, extending his hand in what she recognized as a human gesture of agreement. "Maybe together, we can find a balance." Zix extended her limb, mimicking the gesture as best her alien physiology allowed. "To balance, then, between the sword and the microscope." As their 2 species began the work of building an alliance, the Poseidon loomed in the viewport, a testament to humanity's capacity for both terrible destruction and profound protection. The Guardian of the Void would soon be joined by others, a combined fleet of human warships and Union exploration vessels, each learning from the other, each contributing their unique strengths to a galaxy that needed both the sword and the microscope to face whatever lurked in the darkness beyond.